Welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here alongside Anthony Pyne of RTÉ Sport Online. I'm going to be joined a little bit later on by Gartland and Paul Corry when we'll be reviewing the latest League of Ireland action and a little bit more as well. And you can watch or listen to this podcast on RTÉ.ie, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your pods. But first, it's a big week in the build-up towards the FIFA Women's World Cup for Ireland, with the final 23-player squad to be named on Wednesday. It was originally going to be Thursday, but Vera Pauw has brought this forward, Anthony. And is there anything to be read into that, or is it fairly insignificant in terms of moving it forward 24 hours?
I think it's just to let the players know as soon as possible now, and not to draw it out. You know, there is a big media day planned for Thursday in UCD, where all of the selected players for the 23-player squad, plus 3 reserve players, also the 3 backup players, are permitted to travel to Australia, and they'll be part of the group up until the day before the first match against Australia, so up until the 19th of July. So all 26 players will be up and available for interview, and there'll be tons of media and lots of potential around that. And I think it just makes sense, probably from her point of view, to give this announcement its own day. So it will be revealed tomorrow morning. Today we're recording this on Tuesday, so it'll be revealed, I would say, around 10:30 a.m. On Wednesday. And I think, you know, at the time of chatting to you now, Raf, I'd say the players know. I think they probably knew yesterday. Not an easy process. She's spoken about it a few times. It's you know, it's tough, and you know, they've spent the last 2 weeks together in camp at Abbottstown and at UCD, and you know, there was the game against Zambia last Thursday, which was sort of viewed as like one final chance for people to put their hands up, and which some players did. Amber Barrett, it was probably going to make it anyway, but she really rubber stamped her place with 2 goals off the bench, and Claire Reardon, who was excellent. So there's some interesting decisions that have to be made, and we will obviously all will be revealed tomorrow, Raf. But yeah, it's not an easy process to go through. But that's, as Vera Pauw said, this is elite sport. It's tough, but it's just a necessary part of the whole thing, you know.
Yeah, very much so. And obviously after the 3-2 win over Zambia, she was talking to Tony O'Donoghue. So let's listen to her, because of course, as you've said, she's talked about this dilemma that she's facing. It's very difficult to make these phone calls and all kind of shatter dreams in a sense as well. But it's obviously part of the gig as a manager to do that. So let's listen to her anyway.
It was interesting the way you chose your first 11 and then the changes that you made. But Amber Barrett, look what she's done for you again this evening. She's surely in your plans now. And I know you can't reveal that tonight, but my goodness.
I cannot say that, but we've been working together again. Yeah, the fact that the ways that she responds is, yeah.
And Claire O'Riordan as well. I mean, the fact that you didn't sub her off at half-time and she responded to that, that was almost an impetus for her as well. What a great header.
And Claire has come from so far. She had a major injury this season, came back, was first not in the core group. And the result of her last 2 games, we brought her in because she just convinced us that she had to be part of it. And look what she's done today. I'm so proud of her.
How important was the Scottish Cup final? Obviously, you've been keeping an eye on her.
That was crucial. It was because of the Scottish Cup final that I decided that we needed an extra play in, because we couldn't miss her out.
Another player who didn't go off at half-time, a young player, Abby Larkin. She must be very pleased with her this evening.
Yeah, she's a player that needs to trust herself, her own abilities and her own talent and qualities a bit more. And that's what I said to her when she came off. Because the second half, she got free. At half-time, we spoke about it, one-on-one. That she had to forget. Everybody wants her advisor, but she is a player that needs to play from her feelings, from her creativity and what she feels in the situation, because that is her strength. And the way that she responded was also very, very good.
How concerned were you in the first half? Because they were very nervous and very edgy, understandably perhaps, considering what was at stake.
Yeah, but also the power of Zambia, the physical power was, that frightened them. And the first words in the dressing room were, "Girls, if you have fear of failure, you will never succeed. You must have the guts to fail, because that's the only way to succeed." And especially Claire Reardon, also with her on one-on-one, we've discussing that open, and you can always turn back if you cannot go forward, but don't go just back as a principle. And she responded also so well on that.
Finally, Vera, Courtney Brosnan did very well and made a lot of important saves. You didn't feel like giving any other goalkeeper an opportunity tonight?
No, not because of the other goalkeepers, but we have only 3 games and she must be ready. It is a gamble. But no guts, no glory. We must have the guts for that. She needs game time. She must be at her best at the World Cup. And this game was so crucial to get into game rhythm again. So that is why we decided that we gambled on her match rhythm instead of giving more goalkeepers the chance.
Okay, so that is Vera Pauw there, and we'll also listen to Amber Barrett and Claire Reardon a little bit later on. They were both talking to Tony Donoghue as well, and we'll also discuss the goalkeepers thing because that's actually kind of an interesting situation as well in terms of numbers. But in the lead up to the Zambia game, Anthony, I mean, who were the sort of players would you have said were nailed on beyond the obvious ones of Katie McCabe, Courtney Brosnan, Louise Quinn, and Denise O'Sullivan? Like outside of that, say that quartet, who were the others you would have said were like pretty much 1 foot and a number of toes on the plane?
Well, look, I think the fact that the American-based players, Sinead Farrelly and Marissa Shiva, were included in the initial 31 panel player, but they were never going to be able to link up until after the Zambia game because of their club commitments in the NWSL. I mean, that's a big hint. That suggests that they're both going to be on the plane. Look, I don't know. Like the big question marks are around the centre half situation, because if Aoife Mannion is fit, and we still don't know. Like she had the brace taken off her knee yesterday, and they were going to sort of survey her recovery after that and have a look at things and see how she was progressing. And the noises coming out of the camp are that they think she'll make it and they expect her to make it. But it's not guaranteed either. And also you have to bear in mind that she hasn't played any football now. She's now going to go into... I mean, hopefully she's okay to figure against France. And then after that, you've got the warm-up game against Colombia over in Australia. So she won't have had, even if she figures against France, she won't have had a lot of football under her belt going into that game against Australia, where she's going to be tasked with trying to shackle arguably the best striker at the tournament in Sam Kerr. Now, if Aoife Mannion is okay, then you're looking at a situation where, you know, the likes of Diane Caldwell, Claire O'Riordan, you know, they're scrapping for that other centre half, the place as defensive cover there, and one of them has to miss out, and you know this is where it gets really tricky, and you know that spills into midfield. You know, Sinead Farrelly, obviously she's probably going to start against Australia because she's such a talented player. Like, she's only played an hour for Ireland, but she is a really, really good player. And she'll start, like she will start against Australia. So what happens then? Like, does that mean that someone like Rusha Littlejohn could be in trouble? Kira Grant, you know, really solid player with hearts. And then I think, you know, I have a piece today sort of speculating about what the squad will be. Like, Heather Payne has been deployed as a right wing back in the last 3 matches, having been a striker throughout Vera Pauw's whole reign. And that impacts on the squad, because then, you know, the likes of, say, Harriet Scott, other fullbacks, like even Anya O'Gorman, like does that mean they might get squeezed out? So it's very difficult to say who is 100% locked in once you go beyond that core of Katie McCabe, Denise O'Sullivan, Louise Quinn, Courtney Brosnan, Niamh Fatty. Like, once you start, there's that core that are definitely in, and then there's another sort of outside core that it's up for debate, you know. And I get, you know, if you sat down 6 people who watched this team and covered this team over the last couple of years and asked them to give you your 23, I think everybody would have a different 23, and that probably best sums up the situation at the minute, Raf. There's a few margin calls, so I mean, I had a stab at my 23. I included Sophie Whitehouse, the goalkeeper, in as one of the 3 reserves, because I think Pauw likes to train with 4 goalkeepers, but I don't think she'll include 4 goalkeepers in the 23.
Yeah, it does. It feels a little bit impractical because, you know, I was listening to the coverage of the Zambia game, or watching it, I mean, with Karen Duggan and with Stephanie Roach as well. And they were discussing this issue about the 4 goalkeepers. And I mean, the marginal calls you're talking about there in terms of the outfield players, it becomes much, much tighter. And it's actually quite rare to see more than 3 goalkeepers called up in any squad.
I don't think it will happen, but she does like to have 4 for training purposes. So that's why I think she might bring Sophie Whitehouse as one of the reserves. I'd be really surprised if she brings 4 within the 23, because look, really that's just, as you say, like it's making things even harder again for herself. Particularly if one of those players in the 23 is Aoife Mannion, who is not, she's, no matter what, like you can't say that she's coming in absolutely in peak fitness. Like there's always going to be a slight question mark, because she's had terrible problems with her knees in the past as well. She's had 2 ACL injuries, and this particular knee injury is a ligament issue. She tweaked the ligaments. Now it's not really serious, but again, it's just a reminder like of the problems that she's had with her knees. So I don't think we'll see 4 in the squad, but I wouldn't be amazed if she does bring another keeper as one of her reserves.
The 3 training players, yeah.
Yeah, the 3 training players,
yeah. Let's listen to Amber Barrett and Claire Reardon if we're talking about players who definitely put up a hand to or for inclusion. Both of them certainly were, and they were both talking to Tony O'Donoghue after the Zambia game, where both of them scored.
Do you feel you were almost auditioning for a place tonight?
Yeah, I think so. Like, to be honest with you, like, there's a lot of pressure on everybody for the next few days, obviously, until we get the squad name. But to be honest with you, there's always that quiet little bit of confidence around everybody. And look, most important thing was to get, minutes in the legs for a lot of the girls. You've seen people cramping that would never use the cramp. I don't think Megan Connolly's ever cramped in her life, and she cramped today. And look, it's pre-season for us. A lot of girls had a good break, so look, I think we're all in a good place going into the campaign.
Well, as George Hamilton put it, would you like a window or an aisle seat? Would you like a window or an aisle seat?
Oh, I love the aisle. I love the aisle.
Would it be fair to say you might be a bolter in this squad? I mean, Vera was telling us your performance in the Scottish Cup final was a big part of getting into this position.
Yeah, well, the most important thing for me when I was assessing myself in the lead up to camp was making sure that I was playing, I was fit, I was healthy, I had good rhythm and confidence, and thankfully that brought me here today, and I was able to try and bring that into the game.
Talk to me about the goal. How did it feel?
Oh, I don't know how to put it into words. Like, scoring for your country for the very first time at home in front of these fans. My family are in the crowd. Like, massive credit to the team and to Vera for giving me the confidence.
And some credit to Megan Connolly for the quality of the ball.
Absolutely, pin perfect, and that's what she does for us. So I'm just really happy that I was able to contribute tonight in scoring a goal, and trying to do my best in my defensive duties as well.
What's it going to be like for the next week now until Vera finally announces the squad? What'll the nerves be like?
Yeah, well, there'll definitely be nerves. There's no doubt about that. But we've a fantastic group of players here and an amazing staff behind us. So all we can do is continue to keep working hard and push each other in every training sessions to be the best that we can.
All right, so that was Claire Reardon there, and before that, Amber Barrett, who scored twice against Zambia, and I think she's pretty safe in terms of picking the aisle seat now. I don't think she's any worries about that. But as you said, Claire Reardon is in the most competitive part of the squad, which is probably that defensive line among the centre-backs and also the wing-backs.
Yeah, she is. Look, I mean, it's because it's a squad full of versatile players as well. There's lots of variables and potential scenarios here. Like, I think Claire Reardon, like, she's finished the season brilliantly, and Vera Pauw has obviously chatted about that, the way she's been playing at Celtic, and she was player of the match in the Scottish Cup final, and she was very strong. She was very strong on Thursday night, and Vera Pauw did make a point of talking to her, talking to the press, chat to Tony about her performance, but also to the press afterwards in the mix zone. She specifically spoke to Claire Reardon at half time and told her, just believe it, trust yourself more. You're better than you're showing, because she'd done okay in the first half, but she was really good in the second half. And you're thinking, is Pauw sort of trying to extract something there? Does she see something in her that maybe might get her on the plane? She won't start unless there's more injuries, but she's shown herself to be very solid and dependable backup. And you got to bear in mind what you're facing here. Well, what Ireland are coming up against, like Australia and Canada, are two really excellent teams, like two top teams that will have aspirations of going deep into that tournament. And Nigeria, I mean, we probably got a good gauge with that match against Zambia. Zambia were very direct, very quick, full of players willing to run at you, with the ball in possession ball, full of dribblers. The likes of obviously Barbara Banda is excellent. But Grace Chanda was really good as well. Rachel Kundananji. Nigeria are similar, except they're better. They're better again, Raf. They're better organised, and they with outstanding individuals. So we're going to need players who can stand up to that, and that's no slight on any of the other defenders that are there. The likes of Diane Cowan, who's been a brilliant servant to Ireland. She won't let anybody down if she is in the panel. It's just one of those margin calls, and it could come down to who's currently in better form, who's trained particularly well in the last 2 weeks. I mean, that's why this camp has been so crucially important. Vera Pauw was extremely methodical in her approach. Like, all these players will have heart rate monitors and training to be looking at whose fitness levels are in the best shape, who's going to be able to cope with playing 3 games in 3 days, or that type of turnover and the jet lag and everything that comes with it. So that's why tomorrow there could be 1 or 2 surprises. There could be 1 or 2 surprises. And yes, that back line is very competitive. Let's not forget that. I mean, I think Katie McCabe could start left wing back against Australia. I think she could be deployed there, because Australia, you're not going to stop Sam Kerr. If she gets service, we're not going to stop her. She will score goals, 100%. So they have to stop the service, and a lot of their service to Kerr comes from the wide position. So it would make sense to use Katie McCabe there. I know she's a brilliant player, and you can play her anywhere, and that takes her out in the middle of the park. But she's so strong, and the threat is so potent on the 2 wide areas that she might decide it makes more sense to use her out there. So that puts another strain on the people jostling to get into that defence. So look, this will all be debated and mulled over as we get closer to that game. But for now, it's a squad issue. Who's going to make the actual squad? And as I said, Raf, I know not to sit on the fence here, because I did take a stab at picking the squad, but it is very difficult. It's very difficult, and I probably could have picked 3 squads really. Like, there's just a few very, very tight margin calls there.
Yeah, because your piece, it's D-Day for Ireland hopefuls as Vera Pauw prepares to name World Cup squad. So that's on rte.ie/sport. And also, for anyone who wants to read it, if they're watching the YouTube version, just go to the description box under the video. You'll find a link to it there. And you've divided it up into sort of, apart from the 3 goalkeepers, it's like a 7-7-6. But actually, when you kind of drill down, there's certain players maybe who are going to be playing in other sections of the field rather than like Heather Payne, I think, being the main example.
Yeah, and Marissa Shiva and Abby Larkin, I think, are listed among the forwards. They could play basically wide midfield positions. Really, they're not going to be played through the middle. And as I said, like the likes of Katie McCabe could play. She could pop up at left wing back. Megan Conley could play centre half or centre midfield. So there is a lot of fluidity within that, and that's obviously going to help Vera Pauw as well throughout the tournament. Players who can switch around if need be and cover certain positions.
Yeah, and obviously the send-off game at Tala Stadium, it's the 6th of July next week, where they take on France, who are generally among the strongest teams at the World Cup, so it'll be a good test for them there. And obviously it'll be probably less experimental than the Zambia game, given the final squad will have been named. But one final point before I let you go, just in regards to Vera Pauw's contract, because that's also been discussed as well. Is there an expectation that's going to be done before the World Cup?
There is, yeah. I mean, she said as much. She did say, we asked her about it last Wednesday, and understandably, she said, look, the focus is on the World Cup now. She's got a lot on her plate. She was preparing for the Zambia game, and she's trying to whittle down that squad. But she did again reiterate that she wants to have it done, sorted before the World Cup. So I think we'll get white smoke on that. Maybe next week, Raf. Obviously this week there's so much going on, and there'll be the squad announcement tomorrow and a big media day on Thursday, and then she'll start preparations for the France match on Thursday week. So yeah, we might get it next week. But I think it's coming, and it's good news. She's staying on for another campaign at least, and there's so much to look forward to, even beyond the World Cup, because they have their first game at the Aviva Stadium. First time the women's team has played the Aviva Stadium in September in the Nations League against Northern Ireland. That's another milestone moment for the players. The Nations League group is winnable. You know, so I'll be optimistic that Ireland will go well there. And then you're leading into a Euros qualification campaign where they'd be really fancied to get through that. So crest of a wave, all good vibes at the minute. It's going to be, you know, a tough couple of days for the people who don't make the plane, obviously, because these players have all been part of the journey. They really have. Whoever doesn't make it, they've all been part of the journey. They've all played their part. But once we get through that, it will be full steam ahead, and excitement will really start to ramp up for this tournament.
Yeah, very much hectic times between now and the 20th of July anyway. But Anthony, thanks a million for your time.
Thanks, Raf.
All right, now I am joined by Paul Corry and Graham Gartland, and we're going to be reviewing the latest SSE Electricity Men's Premier Division action. But before we do that, just to start off, lads, you know, we're not too far off in terms of the last international window for Stephen Kenny's Ireland. It's not too far back in the rearview mirror, but especially the Greece match, which really was the most pivotal of the two games. And Graham, I suppose first, on reflection, almost a couple of weeks on now, I mean, what's your reading of that performance and where it leaves Stephen Kenny and this team?
We get asked this question a lot, and even when you're giving an opinion, you get asked, are you pro Kenny or are you against what they're trying to do? And to be honest, it's a bit disingenuous question, because everybody wants Ireland to do well, and we want them to play a brand of football doing it. But I felt with the Greece game in particular, I think tactically we were a little bit poor in that we let them dictate the game to us. When you do play your three at the back with your wing backs, you have to be willing to slide and engage with fullbacks high up the pitch, and be willing to do that and take that little risk sometimes that you might be maybe 1v1 at the back, but you trust your central defenders to deal with it. And I think when you get pinned back like that, that's when they need a little trigger to say, right, one of us needs to go here, as in like a fullback slide out. And I thought Greece understood that if you deepen your fullbacks originally, you can play through them, and then what happens is it gives you a foothold in the game where you can come on. So they deepened them and then went into the wide men and followed it, and that's when they created the overloads. But going into the Gibraltar game, there was a little bit of apprehension as well, and I think that's what's probably crept in, is that even the games that you think, right, we should win this and we should be win it comfortably and win it with a style of play. I think what's come about in the last month after these two games is just an apprehension about what to expect from this Ireland squad, and that's probably not good for maybe Stephen going forward as a manager, because if that can spread, I don't know if it's spread into the squad. I'm not that, I wouldn't have any insight into that, but for fans and people looking in, that apprehension can spread amongst the fans, and you're going into the Gibraltar game thinking, hope this isn't a dull, drab affair where it's a 1-0, but they performed really well, and especially the second half, they took it to them. But they should, we should be beating Gibraltar 3-0, and we should be beating them comfortably. So winning when you're expecting to win has been a problem for Ireland in the games where we're underdogs and we'll play a certain way, i.e. France, and lose 1-0, but be happy with the performance. We're trying to move on from that, and I'm not sure if it has.
Yeah, and Paul, I mean, before that international window, we had Keith Tracy on the podcast, and he had a sort of sense that with Ireland, and it's not really necessarily even Stephen Kenny's Ireland, but there is always a sense of you take one step forward and it's either one step back or two steps back. And I don't know, is that how you view this group and the current trajectory of the squad?
I'm not even sure it's how I view it now, Raf. I would have said maybe even 12 months ago, when you look back at the performances in the Nations League, and in particular Armenia at home, I think there was worrying signs then that we weren't really kicking on from the initial sort of, I guess, bounce that we had from Stephen bringing in new players and trying a new system. And that raised a couple of red flags in my head about how we went about that game and how we were scrambling for a result against a poor enough Armenian team. I think the issue here is that between that Nations League campaign and this European Championships qualifiers, we haven't seen a huge amount of progression, and we were always going to be measured on the Greek games. The Gibraltar games you may as well forget, because they were so poor, and you can't even take that into the conversation. France and Holland is always going to be an uphill battle, but the Greek games were going to be the ones where we had adequate time to prepare. He had, I guess, the guts of his squad and his starting 11 to choose from. Loads of time with the players, and we produce a performance like that, you would have to worry. I don't think we can get away from that performance of how Graham has mentioned there, how tactically we were outdone, how there seemed to be such a disconnect between the back five in the middle and then the middle and the front players. When we've had so much time to work on it, I guess what you're expecting is that there's an understanding and there's a game plan that you go out and execute. And if it doesn't go to plan, well, you're still able to flex a little and pivot and adapt to how the game is played out. So that has worried me a bit. I'm starting to wonder, has Stephen brought this as far as he possibly can? I think he's done incredibly well, and he was incredibly brave to bring in such a young pool of players to give them the experience. I think I've said it before, it's helped those players in their club career. But have we hit a bit of a ceiling now? And would somebody else be better to take it on to the next step? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not saying that it is time for Stephen to go, but I think particularly in the next window, they're very difficult fixtures, but we need to see some level of performance.
Yeah, certainly. September, France in Paris, and then the Dutch coming over here. And obviously the Dutch aren't doing particularly well, but they're still the Netherlands, so they're going to be heavy favourites one way or another. But let's turn our attention to the SSE Electricity Men's Premier Division. So quite a busy weekend. Obviously, the teams in Europe had 2 rounds of action. Everybody else just the one. But Bows and Shamrock Rovers drew 2-2 in the derby on Friday, and then Derry City got back to winning ways with a 2-0 win over Cork City. Dundalk won 2-1 away at Drogheda United in the Louth derby, and then another derby match with Pats beating Shelburne 1-0. Jake Mulroney with a free kick in that. And then UCD, one of the big surprise results of the weekend, beating Sligo Rovers 2-1. And then last night, Monday night, Dundalk and Pats shared the spoils with a 1-1 draw. Dundalk down to 10 men as well, but still managed to get a point. And then Shamrock Rovers in one of the more decisive games in the league, Rory Gaffney with the winner there on 27 minutes as they beat Derry City. But let's start on Derry. Now, in the meantime, they've signed a winger called Paul McMullen, who scored 6 and got 12 assists for Dundee in the Scottish Championship and League Cup. He's going to bolster, I suppose, their forward areas. But on the pitch, Graham, I was listening to you on co-commentary on LOI TV, and I got a sense that they didn't really lay a glove on Shamrock Rovers until pretty much near the end.
Yeah, they played some really good football. I thought they started the game probably the better side. They changed their formation a little bit and tweaked it, and they were clever as well because they probably didn't do that in the warm-up. They looked like they were playing a back 4 in the warm-up and then switched it to a back 5. Diallo midfield along with Adam O'Reilly, and then they had Brandon Kavanagh and Graydon off each side, and they just tucked in a little bit, nearly matching up to what they probably thought Rovers were going to play, which was that boxing midfield. And it worked for them. They found little spaces. They had shots from distance that might have troubled them. But after that, this is where when you're tweaking your system to go against the team that has played this system for the last 4 or 5 years, eventually they will understand it a little bit more. And that's what it looked like it came to fruition. Rovers started filling in the gaps in terms of stopped getting played through. And then they realised that with Derry maybe matching up in midfield, that the space was to play into their front men, and that's where basically they got their joy. They went straight into Gaffney start wandering. But for all of Derry's good play, and they had a lot of possession and they made a lot of passes in the game, and Brandon Kavanagh was really good on the night. He just had no cutting edge. The final pass wasn't good enough at times in terms of the quality of it. It probably had to be really pinpoint for it to be good because of the fact that McGonigal was really well marshalled by Lopez, Cleary and Hoare. So you are looking for something inspirational to land on his head or his foot, and I think his movement in the box could have been a little bit better. That their deliveries from set pieces wasn't very troubling at all. So for all their middle third, they had great play, but their end product wasn't there. And in fairness, it was comfortable for Rovers really, and from a defensive point of view, they didn't have to change the pace of the game around 15 minutes into the first half, and then that's took the game away from Derry, and after that it was only one winner.
Yeah, and Derry now 7 points behind Shamrock Rovers, and there was another issue that Rory Higgins brought up, Paul, which was in regard to the way the fixtures have been laid out for the teams in Europe. So after the game, he said to go 3 games in a week before the break and go 2 weeks without a game, and then 3 games in a week after the break. It's a lot. So either don't give a break or extend the season because the teams in Europe get punished. Would you sympathise with them on that?
It's hard to disagree with it, Raf. It is hard to disagree with it. You know, the league in itself is 36 games. So why do we need a mid-season break in the middle of it? I'm not too sure. I know the players love it, and it's a chance to maybe put the feet up and recharge and then go again to attack the European part of the season. But there is a case that maybe you're better off just letting teams play out during those 2 weeks, and then to lessen the load as they head into Europe, because it can be very challenging for our clubs when they go away to Europe. A lot of them are working off a smaller squad than, say, the likes of a Shamrock Rovers, and trying to use the same crop of players to then produce results both in Europe and the league is a challenge. Now, for Rory, he might have, or maybe wouldn't be as strong on the point if he didn't have the same amount of injuries as he has at the moment. Like you look at McElhenney, Duffy, Whelan, and everybody else that's injured at the moment. That patching as well, like that would have lessened the load on certain players, and he maybe could have rotated the squad a bit more. But I think he does have a case, Raf, whether it's extending out the season or removing the mid-season break. For me, it makes sense. I know when I was playing in the UK, the championship was Tuesday, Saturday, and it's relentless for the full season. You've got, in League One, what was the Johnson's Paint Trophy or whatever it's called now, you've the League Cup, you've so many fixtures to contend with, and there's no break there. So I don't really know why we have it. I know it's a chance for players obviously to get away during the summer, but for the European clubs, I'm sure they would probably rather just roll through and have the squad nice and fresh.
Paul, that I think Rory's point, and you touched on it there, you find a rhythm where you go your Saturday, Tuesdays, you know your body, you know how to deal with it, your body gets used to it. You know, I think when it's so stop-start for these players, it's the rest period, and then it's a spike, but it's not just a spike of one game. It's like, right, spike, rest, straight into another game. And I think that's what catches the players out. And you've seen it, I think Ferrugia got injured for Rovers last night. But you see that it's the periods of them doing nothing and then the spike into going straight into 3 games. That's the load that catches the body out. Do I think players should be able to play 3 games in a week? Yes, I do. But after coming off a 2-week rest, it's a lot. And that's the bit when you're trying to play flat out. It's hard to get your body to do that without something failing on you. So it's like you said, it's peaks and instead of it just being that way. When you get your body in a rhythm, you can handle games like that. But if it's not in the rhythm, that's what causes the trouble.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ferrugia there because the injury was just before half-time, and it looked like he was clutching his hamstring, Graham. But big blow for Shamrock Rovers, especially when, the European draws have been done now. So there's a map ahead to what games are coming up.
Yeah, myself and actually Con Murphy were talking about on the comm last night, Raf, and about what Paul said about him last week, about him scoring more goals. And we touched on it, saying for the presence he has, he probably does need to score more goals. But one of the other issues probably that Neil's had, and it's these injuries. And that's the thing that's probably holding him, because when he does get in a rich vein of form like he has done this season, he then goes and re-injures himself. Again, through no fault of his own, but that's one of the things that you're looking at that's maybe stopping him getting really into an Ireland squad. But he's been excellent this season, and they will really miss him if he is out for an extended period, especially in Europe, because he brings pace and power. And when you play against the European teams, you need that sometimes, even just to carry you up the pitch, even just to get territory in the game at times and give you a respite in the tough away games. But he's been excellent. His goal against Bohemians was fantastic. Brilliant header. His desire to get in there, an unbelievable cross from Sean Kavanagh, I have to say, the way he just whips it and it's dipping as it's coming into the box. It's hard to go and attack that as a defender, but Ferrugia just catches it beautifully on the move. And but he's been fantastic. He's probably been Rovers' best player this season, I'd say.
Yeah, and in terms of just a reference in the comms again, but you were talking through Gaffney's goal as well, and there was a lot, like obviously a lot of the focus is him on the ball making that run sort of cross field, but there was a lot more going on around it.
Yeah, Donegan just as he overcarries it and he ends up going into a tunnel really where he doesn't have anything in front of him to play and there's no length in the game for him. And Gaffney stops him turning back. He probably needs to just hit a diag there and hope for the best, but he tries to play a short one and it gets nicked and Gaffney's away. I think boys should foul him. I know people probably don't want to hear that, but the cynical side of sport, I'd have fouled him all day long. And but he puts inside, and then McElhenney's. There's two things that happens with Kenny. John Kenny pulls down the side of McElhenney, and he catches him that he can't actually go in front the ball. Now, if he is going to go in front the ball, he needs his other defender to come with him because that way Kenny's offside. But because his other defender's deeper, he can't. So that allows Gaffney to just drive into that right in front of the D, and he pulls the trigger. I at the time I said I thought Brian Mark could have done better with it. I've watched it back since, and I still think he probably could have done better. I think he could take an extra step before he launches into the dive. I don't think the shot is hit overly well or overly powerful. He is cutting down on it. The only probably respite myself and Con were saying that might be on is that he wraps a front at the front area of the post because that was the only place he could put it, and the defenders, you're hoping the defenders block that side of the goal, but it goes through Boyce, I think, and into the bottom corner. But I seen Paul was saying that he probably felt Brian Marr should have done better on it. I think he should have as well. But
I'm slow.
Kenny's movement kills McElhenney, like, you know.
Yeah, I'm slow to criticise goalkeepers, but I think when you look at it and you freeze it, I know it's much easier to analyse the game when you have the time to watch it back. But I just thought Brian was too far over. I thought he gave Rory too much goal to work with in that situation, and potentially if he was half a yard across, he would have gotten to it. But I thought, Graham, looking at the game last night, I thought Johnny Kenny and Rory Gaffney looked really good. I thought it was the best I'd seen Johnny Kenny with his back to goal. If you think back to that chance that he created for Richie Tell, it looks as if he's going to just lay it on the Jackburn, and he rolls McElhenney, I think it was at the time, and he plays in a brilliant reverse pass. And the understanding between the two seems to have clicked in recent weeks. And between Friday and Monday night, I thought Roy Gaffney was brilliant. I thought some of his play yesterday, whether it was in wide areas or just in that 10 area, and then of course his goal, I think he's back to the level that we saw particularly last season.
He's at his best when he wanders. I think when you put a striker up beside him and he plays round him and off him, and I spoke to Rory about this, he likes that role that, you know, when he's not in the box, there's somebody in there that he can put the ball into and link with and come onto it, and he gets that sort of freedom to go where he likes. You even see that with the goal. He picks it up in an inside left channel and he drives all the way. But you're right, the link-up play was better from Johnny Kenny. He was better with his back to goal. I agreed with you about that. But the game was on for him to do that a lot, Paul, because the way Derry fronted the midfield, Diallo and Adam O'Reilly just latched on, and it allowed them passes into the front men because the gap became too big. They were worried about his pace over the top, so he said, well, he's probably not that good with the ball to feet, so we'll give that space to do it. But then obviously his improvement has been drastic. But he was but in particular, Gaffney had a couple of sloppy spells in the game, and then he just pops up with a goal. But for some reason, he has this thing of no matter what happens before it doesn't get to him, he just knows he has the quality to just keep going.
Yeah, and it'll be something Jonathan Afolabi at Bowes would certainly aspire to, but he had a brilliant performance in the Derby match before that on the Friday, and the 2-2 draw helped spark the comeback. So let's listen to Afolabi and then his manager Declan Devine.
Well done on the point, but you could have had a hat-trick as well as that goal.
Yeah. Second half we came out and we conceded a goal. Obviously it wasn't a part of our plans, but it was great character to come back and get the 2 goals back. But yeah, we could have won. Yeah.
What'll that do for the belief in the side? Because to be 2-0 down against the champions, that's the score that they've beaten you by twice already this season. What brought the comeback?
We've always had belief in the team. We've got a good group of lads in there, and the first 2 games even we were disappointed coming back in. So I think we put out a great performance today, and we got what we deserved from it.
Should have won it?
If you look back at the chances that we created and the way we played, it's the same in when we played in Tala. Should have probably had a couple of goals there as well, but yeah, no, it was a great performance all around there.
And well done to you for man of the match. Well done.
Thank you.
They're just saying, Declan, how pleased you must have been with Afolabi, player of the match, but that you came back into that game so strongly.
Yeah, we're really disappointed to be 2 down, Tony. I thought we had a lot of chances in the game. But a mad game, because I thought we were very much in the ascendancy. I thought we created a lot of opportunities. John Afolabi, when he plays well, is as good as anything I've ever worked with. He's just so strong, and he's such a good player, and his finish is brilliant. He's had a few good chances, not good chances, he's had chances where he's made them for himself. But a real positive coming back from 2-0 down, but really disappointed that, you know, we haven't come away with 3 points, because we should be winning that game with the control and the chances that we had. But we'll learn from it, we'll move on. But that's the second time we've come back from 2-0. And it's testimony to the players, because they never give up. They work hard, I keep saying it, they work hard every day. You know, they have to take joy out of it, because it's really important, I said to you before the game, not to lose this game, you know, because they are our biggest rivals, but they are the benchmark in Irish football, and to go toe-to-toe with them tonight, I'm extremely proud of the players, but disappointed that we found ourselves 2-0.
Why though were you in danger of losing that game? Because the first half you probably, you know, on terms of possession and chances, you had that as well, but then to go 2-0 down so quickly. Yeah,
look, it's something we have to learn from. It's 2 poor goals. It's nearly similar to the goals we've given in the previous 2 games, and we've talked about it all week. So that's a disappointing aspect, but it's important that we send our fans away home happy tonight. We can't afford to lose 3 games on the spin to them as a Bohemians team. So yes, great to get the point, having been 2-0 down with so little time left, but we have to learn from that and make sure we turn that 1 point into 3.
All right, so that is Bohs manager Declan Devine, and before that was Jonathan Afolabi, who Lisa Fallon had picked as player of the match, and rightly so as well. It was one of his more complete performances, Paul, and it's, you know, he's shown good moments in terms of his hold-up play, but having that kind of complete performance where there's a goal at the end of it and he's actually making a decisive contribution, that's something Bohs have been waiting for and probably needs to be a template going forward.
Yeah, it does, and a lot of Bohs fans will tell you, Raf, that he's been very good for them all season. A lot of his hold-up play, his work rate, his ability to run in behind defences is a threat, and it has been all season. But I guess what is lacking from his play is scoring goals. So to be able to put it together on Friday night in a big game against Rovers, I'm sure he's absolutely delighted with. First and foremost, it was a brilliant game to watch. It really was. It had a bit of everything, and I thought it was much more like it from a Bohs perspective. I thought there was a bite, and I thought there was a tenacity in their game that has probably gone out of their game, I would have said, in recent weeks before the break. And they really went after Rovers. If you think back to the first half, I think it was Adam McDonald was on the shoulder of Dylan Watts, won the ball up high, and that sort of set the tempo from there. So I'm sure Declan Devine, listening to his interview there, I can understand why he was so delighted with the team's performance. But for Jonathan Afolabi in particular, he just needs to score more goals, because he mentioned that there's so much good to his game, and I'm saying he's an absolute nightmare to play against, but he does need to score more goals. No surprise the way the one went in on Friday night, because it was almost like it came from instinct. He didn't have a lot of time to think about it. He just kind of swung a leg at it, and it was a great finish. It's maybe the ones where he's going through one-on-one, or he has a lot of time and he has a lot of space to work with, that he's maybe let himself down. But strikers are streaky, Raf. He could easily go on a run there. He's got a good sort of supply line in behind him. So if he could do that, and if he could maybe just add a few more goals to his game, it could really have a bit of an uptick in both performances and their results.
Yeah, and on the other hand, Cork City, when they were playing Derry City on Friday, Graham, I mean, if you look at the chances that they had in the first half, they probably should have been, 1-2-0 up, and yes, they couldn't really capitalise.
Yeah, they had more possession as well up in Derry, which, from Cork's point of view, they probably coming away from the game thinking, how did they lose it? They had good chances, especially like you said, especially in the first half. I just think the goal comes at a good time, obviously right before half time. Kavanagh does really well. The defender needs to be stronger. Kavanagh, he probably bulked up a little bit in the last probably 6 months, but he's not that strong to be pushing you that far off the ball. And McGonigal, this time, this is what I was saying about his movement probably isn't overly clever in the box, but the ball is pinpoint and it's on his head and it's a goal. And then obviously Cork have to come out and try and they get done on the counter attack later on with another goal. But they've been on a great run of form, Cork. They'll take positives from the performance, like you said, to go to the Brandywell and the Roy McBride Stadium and create that amount of chances and have more possession than Derry it's a great performance from them, but one that ultimately doesn't bring them 3 points.
The big shock probably in the weekend though, Paul, is UCD beating Sligo Rovers. And I mean, Sligo are sort of mired in that battle now for the the relegation playoff spot. I don't think there's no getting away from that. They're in it now at the moment as we go into the second half of the season. But for UCD, it's a great fillip, probably a little bit too late in terms of them mounting a sort of fight back from where they are. But from the Sligo point of view, it's a really big blow at a time where they've been in really poor form.
Yeah, they've got sucked into that sort of bottom half of the table battle now, and the results before the break were poor, and I would have said they would have targeted this UCD game as maybe as an opportunity to sort of build some form of momentum, but you only have to look at the goals that they've conceded to understand why they are in that situation. I mean, the first one is a terrible mix-up and a poor clearance that goes in off the UCD winger, and then the second one is just a basic set piece where nobody goes and attacks the ball, or nobody takes control of a situation, and then they find themselves 2-1 down. So it is worrying times for Johnny Russell. The results haven't been good, the performances have certainly dipped, and the goals from Max Mata have dried up, Raf, as well. And there's a real sort of correlation between Max Mata's goals drying up and Sligo not picking up wins. I think he's only scored one since the 5th of May. And in that period of time, they've only won one game. So they need to find a way of him getting back on the score sheet. There was a really good chance he had where if it was sort of 2-3 months ago, it was a cross into the box, you would have seen him bury it. He's just missed the target with it. And they need to find a way of getting the most out of him because he has a real impact on their results. But for Sligo, like the expectations of that football club are not to be down in the bottom half of the table, is to be competing for European positions, for going strong with the FAI Cup. And at the moment, they're not showing any real signs of doing either. But I hope Johnny Russell gets it together. I hope there's a turn in their performances. Of a lot of time from, I thought they were playing some good stuff at the start of the season, but it's just faded in recent weeks, Raf.
I done 2 of their live games. One of them was up in Derry for RTÉ, and the other one was at Shamrock Rovers, and I thought they were excellent. I actually thought the pulled Rovers around for the first 60 minutes of the game, and I think Stephen Bradley's come out since and said it was the best performance that they've come up against this season in terms of, again, starting the game, middle third of the game, you are excellent. And then I watched them and thought these are going to be a good side, and if they can keep Max Mata fit and scoring, they would carry that on. But they've just really, really dipped. I always worried about them defensively. I think there's a frailty there, and then once that frailty sets in, it spreads throughout your group. Then that, even if you do score, we mightn't hang on to this. Some of the best teams are always built on the fact that when you score, the rest of the squad know we're really going to win this game because there's clean sheets being kept at the back, and then they know they can have the confidence to go on and get maybe the second and third and kill the game. But they always know that the back door is shut, and midfielders and strikers need that security, and I don't think Sligo have that at the moment.
Yeah, whereas Pats have kind of shored up a little bit defensively. Obviously, it was enough to get them with a bit of magic from Jake Mulroney as well, Graham, in terms of his free kick against Shells, albeit then, where they have a man advantage then against Dundalk, and they sort of let that point slip, and they would have been within 5 points of Shamrock Rovers, and I know we wouldn't be really talking about them in terms of being in a title race even with that, but overall, I suppose still under John Daly, they seem to be on the right trajectory.
Yeah, I think they are. I think John Daly's done a great job. Like you said, they have shown up defensively, and they're missing a lot of their defenders. Joe Redmond is out injured. Gravoski's out as well, I think. So they're doing where they're probably not his first choice backline. Dean Linus has come in this year and maybe filled the goalkeeping gap that he had, and he's a steady Eddie type of goalkeeper. Mulroney's free kick is unbelievable, and the view from where he videoed at the dugout is even better. And that's what he's brought in for moments like that. He has become a bit of an impact player for them, and if they can get him performing regularly from the start, I think he has a chance. There's somebody I know from Scotland pretty well, but Daly's done a really good job. He's given them a way of playing. He's not afraid to change that way of playing or move players around if he feels this can tweak the game. And in fairness to him, he's had a lot of experience John, he was at Hearts for a long time, and he coached over in Scotland quite a lot, and then went to Finland with Jonathan Johansson as well. So you can see that experience coming in, and he's quite relaxed about the job and knowing what he's about. And in fairness, they are playing well. But in terms of a title challenge, you're basically in a field of non-runners at the moment. There's nobody even coming at all to challenge Rovers, and I know people say Rovers haven't even got into second gear. They have, because they didn't start the season very well, so they had to come up a level from what they did with start the season. The performances were there, but the results weren't. Now the results are coming with the performances, and they're just running away. But I just can't see any. It's not that I can't see them dropping enough points. I just can't see anybody catching them. Derry have lost too many games. I think they're up to 7 now, if that's right. And to win a league and losing 7 games, nearly on impossible in a 36 team league. So who else is going to challenge? I just can't see anybody at the moment.
Yeah, and then Dundalk are within 3 points of Derry and Pats in 4th place and just above Bows, albeit Bows have a couple of games in hand, Paul. But Hoban's quality made the difference in the derby against Drogheda, where they could have been easily 2-0 down, but Draper hits the post. And then, you'd probably write them off going down to 10 men against Pats, and yet they seem to have whatever form they found just before the break. They've been able to carry it forward in terms of, keeping the points ticking over.
Yeah, I thought they were lucky just looking at the highlights of the Drogheda game. You would have banked on Freddie Draper putting one of his chances away, particularly one that's been squared. He's hit the post. He's also had another one from maybe 9 or 10 yards, slight angle, so you can forgive him for missing that one. But it probably, you're right, Raf, in saying that it came down to Pat Hooban. For me, he's still the best in kind of that 18-yard box that we have in this league. Even the first one, happens very quickly, but the direction that he's able to put on the header is so good away from the goalkeeper. And then even the penalty, like that's a bit of a pressure spot kick. Like against Drogheda away, probably a bit of time to think about it late on in the game, and he just puts it right into the stanchion. And there was no real, I guess, doubt that he was going to put it away. And for me, still, when you look at strikers in the 18-yard box, I know Freddie Draper's done very well as well for Drogheda this season, but just his instincts and his ability to put chances away, he's still, for me, the best in the league. But yeah, Dundalk had picked up a small bit. They were definitely fortunate on Friday night. Watched them last night against Pats and kind of flicking between the two games. They were okay. I thought, like, the pitch really doesn't help. It's funny, when you flick between the Rovers game and the Dundalk game, just the difference in how the ball flows and the tempo to the game, and even the stands and how they look on the telly. But it didn't help.
The commentary as well. Yeah, yourself and Con there. Sorry, Paul, you're missing a massive vital part of the production line there,
But yeah, they were okay last night, Raf, and I'm sure I thought the sending off was ridiculous. I never thought that was a second yellow on Tulloch. I thought it was kind of grappling between the two of them. You could have easily booked either player, and I know Tulloch has probably brought Doyle down in the end, but I didn't think it was a yellow card. I really didn't. It's not as if Doyle was breaking up the other end of the pitch. He was heading back towards his own goal. But a lapse in concentration from Pats lets Dan O'Kelly in, and he takes it well. And maybe when they reflect at the end of the season and it comes down to points between Dundalk and Pats, whether it be for a European position or for second in the table, that might be something that bodes well for them, and maybe just for the togetherness of the group to come back from a situation where you're not expected to get anything will certainly help. But they've still got a long way to go. I'd absolutely echo what Graham has said there with regards to kind of who's chasing Rovers. Consistently inconsistent is all you can say about kind of those 3 or 4 teams below. Good performances, and then they take one step back. And for Pats as well last night, like, that's a game they should have gotten out of Oriel with 3 points. It's a terrible mix up between Lewis and Linus. Like, Lewis has to clear it, lets them in, and just extends the gap out. Like, a draw just only extends the gap between Rovers and the chasing pack. But yeah, there's signs, I would say. There's signs with Dundalk that maybe performances are starting to get a bit better.
Graydon's yellow card last night as well is something that just infuriated me watching it. And again, Con Murphy had to give me the little, that's enough. But I was just fuming how how a player gets booked for that and then has to go off injured because of the challenge. And he actually had a good 2 minutes to maybe rethink it.
Yeah, I thought he was putting the yellow card back in his pocket.
So did I, and I said, fair play to him, well done. A little bit of common sense has prevailed. And then he took it back out. So he was wrong originally, and then he was wrong the second time. And we're looking at him as an ex-footballer, and I'm thinking, well, how have you missed this? How have you got this one so badly wrong that you're booking a boy? He hasn't dived. It's a brilliant tackle. It's a bang of his knee right on the quad. Like, how else is he meant to fall down from that? Like, he's running at pace as well. It's not like it's just ran into him and he can fall backwards. But yeah, I've calmed down a little bit now, but I was fuming watching that, because it just you just lose faith in their common sense to make ordinary decisions, and that it just becomes frustrating.
Yeah, and speaking of decisions, you mentioned the penalty that Hoban converted earlier, Paul. But I was wondering, what do you think of the awarding of it? Because a lot of Andrade United fans were quite unhappy from what I saw on social media about it, because it looked fairly innocuous.
Yeah, I thought it was a penalty. I think when two sort of players come across each other, even if you're the attacking player and you slow down, you wait for the contact, I think you're always likely to get the decision. I just thought there was a coming together and there was almost a tangle of legs. That I think it was it O'Kane, or when he's dribbling into the box. And I think it's a penalty. I can understand why they might feel harshly done by, but if you're an attacking player and you're dribbling towards a box and you feel contact, I mean, a lot of the time you're encouraged to go down, and a lot of the time you'll get those decisions. Yeah,
and Graham, just on Andrade United as well, obviously a couple of players returning from their loans, going back to Lincoln City, and a player that's been mentioned already, Freddie Draper, who's been brilliant this season among those two. I mean, it's a blow for them. Obviously, they'll have to look at finding a way of replacing those goals either within the squad or whether it's another loan from elsewhere.
Yeah, I think not only are they going to miss his goals, but I agree with Paul. I do think he can score more goals if he just concentrates a little bit more on his finishing. But he's an 18-year-old kid, so that will come. But I think it's his presence that he gives them. I think he's the focal point. I think they can play through him. They know he'll stick at certain times. He gets them up the pitch. His hold-up play is excellent. When it does go wide, he gets himself into the box right down the middle of the goal. He's willing to run behind at times as well. For such a big lad, he's probably quicker than you think. You've seen that with the goal he scored in Tala, where it's a really good ball down the side and he's onto it, and he pushes Sean Hoare off as well, which shows that he has the strength. So I think when I saw that news, I got worried for Drogheda, because for all the endeavour they have, and Kevin Doherty's done an unbelievable job, and they play with intensity at times. They play with, they can pass the ball as good as any team on their day, but they don't mind mixing the game up. But Draper was the one that allowed them to mix the game up. So if you went and tried to press the midfield, they play into Draper and then they play off that. So yeah, unless they can pull another rabbit out of the hat with somebody like Draper in terms of his presence and what he brings, it probably is a little bit worrying for Drogheda, because for all the endeavour they have behind the ball, they need somebody down the middle of the pitch that can score them goals and link the play.
Yeah. If Draper does go back to Lincoln, Raf, and he doesn't play games in pre-season and maybe realise that first team opportunities aren't going to be there for him, that for me is a real good fit for Derry. If you think of the problems that they're having in front of goal,
100%.
Knows the league, has shown already he can score goals. That's somebody that I think Rory Higgins will be looking at, and just tracking him over the next couple of weeks. You find out very quickly in pre-season whether you're in the manager's plans or not. Another loan spell for 6 months wouldn't be the worst idea. European football, playing at the top end of the league, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see that one happen.
Yeah, and in the first division, Wexford beat Finn Harps 1-0 on Friday night. Galway United extend their gap at the top after a 4-0 win over Longford Town. Treaty United won 2-0 away at Lone Town. Bray Wanderers beat Kerry FC 3-2. And then Cove Ramblers with a pretty significant 1-0 win over Waterford. So the gap at the top, Galway, 13 points clear of Waterford. And then there's not much between the chasing pack below them. But one other interesting development, and this is sort of off the field, and it's the Mayo News first reported it, that there was approval for the creation of Mayo FC for next season, and that was going to be granted by the FAI, and it has since been launched. And what they're going to be doing, Paul, is bringing in first teams into some of the national underage leagues before having a plan, I suppose, to go and try and set up a senior team, possibly by 2026 or maybe later on. But again, we've talked a little bit a few months ago about sort of the spread of the game around the country. They probably looked at the Kerry FC model, and it's going to be interesting to see how this develops.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, isn't it? I'm sure they've looked at the Kerry model and thought that maybe that's something that they could replicate up around the west of Ireland. There's a number of players who I would have played at underage level from that neck of the woods who were very strong players. David Cawley was one of them, as was Ronan Murray. And then there was another couple who maybe just kind of drifted away, and maybe that's because they didn't have that kind of real recognised League of Ireland presence in Mayo. So yeah, listen, Garth to be much more educated than myself on this, but I think the further we can reach out, the better the development of the game, and keeping people involved and develop that talent and see what it is we can get from that region. So yeah, I'm for it. I'm always quite hesitant, Raf, when we start talking about extra teams in the first division, because I see what is there at the moment, not only in the first division, but also in the Premier Division, and the improvements that need to be made. I think when we start extending numbers and then extending out the number of facilities that need to be done, it starts becoming like millions upon millions on top of what already needs to be done. But I'm absolutely for the development of the underage teams in those areas. And if they can get it up and running, if they can replicate something like Kerry have done in the last couple of months, I'm all for that.
Yeah, because it ties into something else, Graham, and this is the Shamrock Rovers U15s, and you can tell us a little bit about this, going to Amsterdam and beating, obviously, the fabled Ajax 2-1. I think it's just a couple of weeks ago, and this comes at a time where we've recently been talking about the Ireland under-17s and the development pathways there, and then coupled with the FAI looking for 863 million in terms of facilities. And Johnny Ward had a really good piece in the Sunday Business Post in and around this, tying the two things together. But I suppose first on what that under-15s crop did in terms of beating, and like Ajax are synonymous with bringing true youth talent, but then also the challenge of trying to build on things like this, so they're not one-offs.
Yeah, 100%. You don't want it to be one-offs. It came about through a good friend of mine. So Ajax is a really tough place to go into to get a game, because they get so many requests from clubs that just think, oh, we'd love to go to Ajax. So I wouldn't normally do this, but I called in a favour from a really good friend of mine who got in touch with a prominent figure at Ajax and said, listen, this is a really good team. The fact that he had seen some of our players play with the Ireland under-17s or the 16s in the Shield down in Waterford, and he said, you have a good few players in that squad, Graham. The Rovers have. And I says, yeah. I says, we've more coming. So he went and said, right. So we got a game. It was brilliant. They were very facilitating. Ajax, they were really welcoming to us as coaches and all our players. And it was a really good game. Someone said, why didn't you just put out the result? Ajax put out the result. It wasn't up to us to do that. They were the hosts, so they put out the result. But it wasn't about that for us. It was about going there and performing, and making the players believe that they could go and perform. I don't know how Paul felt as a youngster when I was playing underage or Ireland and a team. You're coming up against bigger nations. You always had this little bit of a fear factor of, can we do this? And that's something that I always felt needed to be eliminated from the psyche of young Irish players. And I think it's starting to happen, but you have to challenge them in that environment, that they're coming up against a team like Ajax to see, right, are they able to play at this level? And in fairness, we took them on. We went toe-to-toe with them. We didn't take a backward step. I've since spoke to them on another of other number of things, but that was the whole point of it, was that we can go over and showcase what we can do, and then it builds that relationship that, hold on a sec, like, we'd like to play us again and further down the line, and we can expand the relationship on it. But in terms of the group of players, the effort they put in was fantastic. And like we said, we play their system. the Dutch always play 4-3-3. We play their 3-5-2 system, and we went after them, and it surprised them a little bit when I spoke to them that they weren't expecting us to play that way. They thought we'd sit off them and let them have the ball and try and counter-attack. And then they said when we did get it, we were expansive and let our skillful players have their moments in the game, which they did. And it was a really, really educational trip for both us as staff and the players. And I put out something at the weekend saying, off the back of Johnny Ward's piece was, and Paul touched on it with Mayo, the players, talent doesn't discriminate where it's born. It's born somewhere, and it has to be developed, and it has to be nurtured, and it has to be given an opportunity. And I think if you give good players and good people and hungry players an opportunity, they'll take it. But unless we really build up the facilities and the infrastructure and the hours, that contact hours that we can get to these kids, you're taking away their chance. You're taking away their chance to be and play at the highest level that they possibly can, because we're not investing in them. And there's loads of other things around it politically, that what happens when you invest in football and you invest in sport, all the other metrics come up, physical health, mental health, all that stuff comes around it. But the simple fact is, the top end of our game in this country, our senior team aren't at a level that can compete at the moment. So if we don't fix our underage level and try and make it better, we're never going to get there, because where are they going to come from? You understand? So it's the onus is on us as an organisation, which the FAI and the government, to give a chance to the talented and hungry players in this country. And it's time that they start realising that the talent is there and really invest in it.
Yeah, because it was something, Paul, that we kind of talked about on last week's podcast, which was, Stephen Kenny sort of had a blueprint of what he wants to do, but for him, the hard challenge for him, it's coming from the top down, whereas in any real, in a football nation, it really should be coming from the grassroots up, and then the manager sort of at the very, very top end of the pinnacle sort of builds on that. So there is there's an onus, as Graham Gartland said, in regard to investing at the lower end. Otherwise, you're not going to get the fruits really at the top.
Yeah, I think it's a flavour of the two, to be honest with you, Raf. I think Stephen Kenny is somebody who's good at setting a vision, and then you obviously need the foot soldiers who are going to kind of execute on this on a daily basis, and what that requires is investment. I mean, the game and the clubs, particularly the Ireland clubs now that are taking on the underage structures, are crying out for investment. And the game itself hasn't changed probably a huge amount since when I was playing schoolboy football 20 years ago to how it is today. Yes, the clubs have, but the facilities, a lot of them haven't really changed. And for too long of a period of time, we have stood still while the rest of the football world has moved on. There is now that realisation, and there's great people involved in the League of Ireland structures that can absolutely help with this. But a lot of the time, Raf, that's volunteered hours. That's on top of a job. You go anywhere else in Europe, these are full-time academy staff who are working with kids on a daily basis, working around schooling hours, and the contact hours that they have are just multiples of what our underage systems are able to give kids and teenagers. So yeah, we desperately need investment. The game desperately needs investment. And if you don't, and if you leave it as it is, don't expect then when we come to play Greece in 24, 36, 48 months time that it's going to be any different, because there's a recipe and there's kind of a pathway that you can follow from other nations. Even look at what England have done. And I know they're working with completely different facilities and completely different financial situation, but they revamped the whole national how the game was structured across all. Like, you wouldn't have said it was broken, but they completely restructured, and they've seen amazing results at underage level and at senior level. If we were able to take 5% of that and bring it into our game, what a difference that would make to the development of these kids, and getting them to play the likes of Ajax on a more regular basis, getting them into top European clubs, and then getting them through to first teams.
Yeah, we'll see how that, obviously, as has been discussed, the FAI sort of review on that was published a few weeks ago, and they're looking for 863 million. And given the nature of these type of things, probably it'll be an even bigger figure than that when it actually comes down to implementing something like that. But a final point, Graham, before we go, and it's Robbie Keane being appointed manager of Maccabi Tel Aviv. Now, this was at the start of this week, it was announced, and it kind of it was a bit of a, I was a bit blindsided by it because I wasn't expecting it. He's obviously, his last position was as assistant to Sam Allardyce, as they tried and ultimately weren't able to keep Leeds in the Premier League. But he's joining a pretty big club by Israeli standards, and one of the more successful ones. They were third last season. They've got Europa Conference League qualifiers coming up next month as well. So it's going to be an interesting challenge, one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it was completely left field. Robbie these things tend to pop up from at times, but I know he's been doing a lot of work with UEFA, so that I probably think the relationship might have blossomed through that. But
yeah, and actually the other thing to note, the CEO of Maccabi as well, he would have been at Blackpool as well. I think he appointed Mick McCarthy, or was at least involved. So there might be, I'm not sure what the connection is there, but it's an interesting one anyway.
Yeah, it is, and again, it's his first steps into management by himself. He probably couldn't have picked a more difficult one in terms of going to Israel and trying to learn a language or whatever he has to do to deal with a multicultural dressing room. But I think, it is one to really watch this space. But again, kudos to him for believing in himself and taking on the job, and you're hoping that it works out for him, because everybody obviously wants to see Robbie do well. But it's an interesting take from. I mean, like you said, it's one of those that you just have to sit and watch. I wouldn't. Teams in Israel tend to be a bit trigger happy with their managers as well. So you've seen that, I think, with we've seen that before with previous managers in there. So it's interesting would be the one word you'd use, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, I think that brings us to a close for this week's soccer podcast. So Graham, thanks a million for your time, and also Paul Corry.
Cheers, lads.